Good morning, folks. Life's full of all kinds of interesting stuff. Thought I would step outside and make a morning video in the rain. We're just outside of the rain. Sitting here makes me grateful that I have a shelter to sit under. I was looking up at the corrugated plastic ceiling. Sometimes we take these things for granted. Shit, we take them for granted all the time. When I say we, I guess I'm only speaking for Americans or those within countries with means. Although times are changing, people are becoming, more proficient in getting better access to medical and food, and the hope is that we're helping out the cultures that need it the most, the ones who are in the most turmoil. Something as simple as a little plastic roof to keep you dry is something we often just take for granted. What saddens me is, when it comes to politics, immigration, consensus reality, if you will, people are really quick to just follow suit with what people are saying rather than doing any actual critical research. And then they often accuse other people of not doing their critical research as a reflection or projection back on themselves for not doing their own homework. So to prevent this in my own life, whenever I hear about a subject or somebody makes a claim, the first thing I do is I Google it and I dig into it. But I don't just look at one source or a biased opinion. I research it as best I can and give it whatever I can as far as credibility. Now, some certain politicians, I should say, certain people who are not politicians who are claiming to be educated in politics, people like Donald Trump, have made claims about shutting our borders to refugees. He even joked, whether it was joking or not, about having Muslims wear tags to identify themselves. Now, this is just like Nazi Germany, but we won't get into that. The point is not about Trump or about Germany, it's about refugees. Now I think about these families that are forced from their homes, from groups like ISIL, ISIS, ISI. These people have gained power and traction because the Middle East has been in turmoil. Yes, it's because the U.S. came in, but it's also for many other reasons. That region is very unstable, and the people are willing to take just about anything that's given to them. And if they don't, well, they'll just be shot in a lot of cases anyway. So picture this group of terrorists comes into your town and destroying the way of life, but they're promising you that they're going to bring good things for your people, that they're going to build houses, that they're going to build schools and hospitals. Let's say they make the same promises that the Taliban made the people, which they did make. The promises, that is. Now let's say you live in a very, very poor village, and it's your only hope. Your choice is to say, no, I'm going to stand up for what's right, and then be shot. Or say, okay, just go along with it and have food provided for you, or at least think you're going to. So my point here is that we don't put ourselves in the shoes of many of these people. So ISIS comes into a town. Many of the people stand by ISIS. A lot of the people decide, I'm not going to put up with this in my land. I want freedom. I want to get away from this. So they pack up and they leave. Then they become immigrants. They're migrating across the land. And then they reach the borders, metaphorically, of any one particular country. And then we have all these various European countries who are taking in as many as they can. And here's the U.S., with someone like Donald Trump standing up there saying, we're going to build walls. That we're going to prevent people from coming here. Now, I'm an American and I believe in freedom, and I also believe as an American that we have the right to close our borders if bad people are coming into this country. But that's not the point here. The point is that we are uncomfortable because our American way of life has been threatened, not by other people, but by life, by the world we live in, and in many ways, because of the way that we choose to continue to burn fossil fuels, adding to the problem, further compounding, polluting our rivers with toxic sludge, and people are arguing over whether we should have coal or radioactive power, and all the meanwhile, there's real people in this world that need help. And set aside the personal politics for a minute. If you look at a guy who was born like Trump, born into wealth, born into always having what he wanted, never having to take the soda cans back to buy something to eat, never having to scrape by or file a tax refund, hoping he was going to get one, so he could buy maybe a new car or fix the one he got. My point is that most Americans here are living hand to mouth. America may be a rich country by theory, but the American people are just people. And I think that all of you out there understand how it feels to be broke, or at least a lot of you do. If you don't, I feel sorry for you because it's a humbling experience. But for those who don't, just realize that happiness is what everyone's after in this life. And there's got to be happiness that doesn't come at the cost of others' freedoms. So many of our American freedoms come at the cost of others, or at least we think so. So I'm not going to sit here and dwell on this thing. I guess the only point I wanted to make was, if you have a corrugated roof over your head when you're sitting outside, you just think about the huts and villages and areas where these things are so complicated that, people can't get the resources they need. Countries like China that are building entire ghost cities. Because when you build a city, you can claim that your infrastructure and your GDP is growing. Now this is fact. This is why China is building several cities that are supposed to have millions of people in there that only have maybe 1/50th or 1/20th of the population that they could, because they're building them too fast. Meanwhile, the rest of their country starves. And my point there is that a lot of people go hungry, and we need to stop our way of life and to realize that we are progressing, that sure, we can be a great free nation, we can be a great free group of nations, or just people. But while people are starving and while people are suffering, we can't take advantage. Now, I don't want to say we can't be happy, or that we have to just say, boo-hoo, I'm not going to enjoy myself because there are people suffering. There will always be suffering, my friends. There will always be suffering in this world, in this part of life. And there will always be people who choose to suffer. Just like I mentioned the other day, the guy who stands down there by the soup kitchen, and he claims he's hungry with his sign, but he refuses to go in because of his pride. In some countries and sometimes in this country, people would scramble to the damn soup lines to get food, but even our homeless in this country are spoiled compared to some people who work their asses off in other countries. And yeah, I'd love to be able to sit here and say America's the greatest nation on earth, but I have to honestly say that we can only get there if we have our politics and the behaviors of our government reflect the will of the people, not just the few. And to not let the media play on your emotions. I urge everybody to turn off the TV. If you want to watch the news, go in, watch all the clips of what's going on, and then go to several sources to get that information. And if you start doing that, you'll quickly realize that a lot of what we think is true is merely obscuring what's actually going on. And then at a point you become disinterested in anything politicians have to say, in anything the media says. And I went through this for a period of about 15 years. I didn't trust anything people were telling me as far as the government or the media. And I'd say it was all BS, it's all propaganda. And then I started to realize that you've got to get your information from somewhere. So I do my best to do my research on things. I wouldn't say that I have any of it figured out completely. The most important thing for me is not just being, credible in just one subject, but having a wide variety of interests. In other words, you can't sit there and dwell on global warming if you don't understand the impacts, nor can you talk about feeding the world if you can't come up with a method for doing so. But as of right now, we've got enough food to feed 10, 11 billion people, far more than we have. So most of that goes to grain, to feed, to ethanol. It's a very complicated system we've woven. So I'd like to leave by saying that it's not the American people's fault. If you're a person who wants to blame America for the world's problems, please don't, because Americans are good people. All the neighbors and friends that I have are good people that mean well. And yes, there are many ignorant people too, but just realize that ignorance is not a choice. It's just something that happens. It just means that you're unaware of all the facts to make a decision. So I try not to be too, much of a hater, or I don't hate anyone or just despise anyone for their opinions. I understand that people want to keep our borders clean, and I also understand that we need to help people. So it's a very complicated issue, yes. But even if we disagree on many points, I would hope that at least as humans we can be rational enough to come together and laugh it off in the end and shake hands. Because after all, that's what progress is all about. Take care, everybody.